We have a caregiver support group here at Columbine, and we meet just once a month for an hour, and we share our joys and sorrows and our struggles and our questions. We lay down our laments, probably complain a little. And that 1 hour per month is set aside for caregivers to care for themselves. And wouldn't you know, sometimes folks have a hard time leaving their responsibilities for 1 hour a month. You know who you are. This past Wednesday in that group, we asked ourselves, what are the best ways to use our precious time off to recharge our batteries? One person expressed that when break time comes, there's so many things they want to do that they don't even know where to begin. That reflection reminded me of many years ago when I had 4 little children, and the older 2 would go to school on Mondays, and I would pay a friend for 2 hours on Monday mornings to watch my 2 youngest, and I was free to do whatever I wanted. I was so exhausted back then, and breaks from caring for my little people were so rare that I felt anxiety about how to use that precious time. Sometimes I would go sit on the bench at Crown Hill Park and watch the hawks circling above me in the sky and cry. I remember being so exhausted that once I fell asleep in the tall prairie grass at Crown Hill Park. I have an actual artist's rendition of me back then about 10 to 15 years ago. Devin, if you've got it. Those were the days when, just like the person who shared with the caregiver support group last week, I also felt, and you can leave it up there too, Devin. She's coming up again. I also felt anxiety about free time. There was so much I wanted to do with my 2 hours. Sometimes all I could do was cry. I'm sure people at Crown Hill Park wondered what was wrong with the woman either crying or sleeping in the grass on a Monday morning. And even though I was in quite a state, complete with the missing shoe, I still felt guilty about those 2 hours off. And Devin, you're okay, right? It didn't kill you. Sometimes we get accustomed to a certain level of responsibility and we don't notice how unhealthy or unbalanced our lives have become. I was tempted to use the frog analogy, but A, it's horrible, and B, it's not actually true. So instead, I thought about the actual psychological term called a creeping normality. This creeping normality of overwork is baked into our culture, and it is affirmed and reinforced by our culture. Our obsession with having to prove ourselves to be independent or unflappable actually started a few centuries ago with the interpretation of Christian scripture to manifest destiny. The belief that white Christians were ordained by God to civilize this wild land and the native people. Our country was built on an ethos of rugged individualism and pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. These are still with us today, byproducts of colonialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy culture. The drive to be productive and hardworking, which are both great qualities for people to have, went from being virtues to a value system by which Americans judge ourselves and each other. Now, of course, hard work in and of itself is not a bad thing. Hard work and service to others are pillars of our self-esteem and our feeling of belonging in our communities. But if we aren't careful, our thinking can get a little out of balance and we can forget what's really important. We can forget the bigger picture, as the great poet Mary Oliver wrote, to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Our bodies are not meant to exist in continual motion, working all day, every day. We are mammals, and mammals spend the majority of their lives resting. I know what my pets are doing right now. They're chilling. That's their main occupation. They got nothing to prove. It's only these humans that let our big brains tell us that we only have value if we are constantly busy. This paradigm shows up frequently in our Unitarian Universalist culture. Unitarian Universalism springs from two Protestant denominations, and while the Universalists were a little more fun-loving than the Unitarians, both sides have our roots, religious roots, in Puritanism. Puritans believed that each of us has a vocation from God, and that our best way to be faithful is to find our vocation and work at it unceasingly. The German sociologist Max Weber observed that Puritans manifested their religious beliefs by developing a culture of hard work, which they instilled in their children, and this influenced the evolution of the culture of this country, affecting immigrants who came into the colonies and later to the States. He coined a term for this value system, calling it the Protestant ethic, and defined its key elements as diligence, punctuality, and deferment of gratification. He observed that economic failure became a sign of a weak or non-existent Christian faith. In modern Christianity, this thinking has evolved into the prosperity gospel, which is embraced by evangelical, Pentecostal, and charismatic Christian groups who believe that our ability to transcend poverty and illness comes through devotion to Christian beliefs. By this rubric, if you're successful, it means that you are chosen and blessed by God, and if you aren't, your faith wasn't strong enough. This thinking is problematic for many reasons, but the biggest problem is that it becomes a way for people with unearned privilege to take full credit for their success and look down on those who have less. And while there is no shame in working hard to provide a comfortable, educated, well-fed life for ourselves and our families, the problem comes when we're so rooted in the value of these artificial markers of success that we forget what else is important. We forget that we aren't machines, that we aren't meant to worship diligence, punctuality, and deferred gratification at the expense of our soft animal bodies. Author and scholar Alex Soojung Kim Pang writes about the hidden role of leisure and mind wandering in our creative lives. In his book, Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less, Pang's research found we're actually more productive if we take at least a 15-minute break every 4 hours that we work. That's the minimum. He also suggests getting up early, keeping routines, and stopping working at a certain time every day. He's big on putting boundaries around our work lives and responsibilities. He calls for a culture change where we take breaks and we limit our work time. As UUs, we work for culture change, but first we have to notice our own culture. Many years ago, I lived in Ireland in an eco-village, and each workday at 11 a.m., everyone would drop their work and take a break for 11sies, which is a cup of Irish milky tea and a biscuit, which is what we call a cookie. So I was in my 20s, and I was super annoyed. I was like, why do we have to stop working at 11? I just got into what I'm doing. No matter what, whether we wanted it or not, that was time for a cup of tea. So sometimes I would keep working, and the Irish folks would just sigh, perplexed by the Yank who not only drank herbal tea, which was a sin, but also didn't want to stop working and take a break. Well, it's years later now, and I get it. I understand Irish culture includes cups of tea every time you enter a house and several other prescribed times per day, because tea is rest. Tea is connection. tea is downtime, and cups of tea are built-in breaks. So the Irish don't really need researchers to tell them that breaks are good for us. They keep us fresh, and when we don't take them, we start to get, as they would say, stroppy. Breaks are actually boundaries. One of my teaching pastors told me a few years ago that poor boundaries lead to burnout, and burnout leads to poor boundaries. I didn't want to hear that, but since she said it, it echoes in my brain all these years later because I see how true it is. Boundaries are our own responsibility. We are not victims of continual overwork and stress. It's up to us to manage our stress. For ambitious people like myself and many of you, most of you, that may mean letting go of some things we want to do just because it's too much. Even if we enjoy our work, if we don't slow down, we find ourselves getting crabby. Our boundaries get sloppier, and eventually the frantic pace of our lives will take a toll on our health. And then if we don't self-regulate, our bodies will do it for us. Burnout is miserable. It's miserable for ourselves, it's miserable for everyone around us, and it steals our joy. Oh, she's gone. I was going to mention her again. She is not enjoying her baby's first steps or her wife's beautiful smile. And what are we here for if we aren't basking in our baby's first steps or our wife's beautiful smile? What is the value of our presence, our joy, of being relaxed and appreciating the natural world and our communities? What are we trying to prove with our endless task lists? Are we trying to prove that the world can't live without us, or that we don't need anyone else? A couple years ago, I went to Columbine in South America for my brother's wedding, and my new sister-in-law's family kept saying to me, "Poco y poco, poco y poco." Whenever I was expressing concern about something in my broken Spanish, someone would say, "Poco y poco," which means slowly, slowly. And I thought, oh, well, that's a Colombian thing. But then, a couple months ago, I spent the day here working with some of our new Venezuelan friends, and what did they say to me? Poco y poco. I thought, okay, I guess I'm the common denominator here. Is this something I need to listen to? Latino culture is slower, more family-oriented. Of course, that's a generalization. Latinos work hard, but they also rest and enjoy life and each other. To them, and I know this manic energy of efficiency seems to have gotten worse in our culture when I think back to growing up in the 70s. When I was really young, we lived across the street from Mrs. Stilwell, and I used to trot over and sit on her front step with her in the evenings, and she would paint her toenails bright red and just do nothing. Who does that? Nobody does that anymore. Jason and I got 2 chairs for our front porch as wedding gifts 2.5 years ago, and I'm not sure we've actually ever sat on them. One of the cushions blew away in a windstorm before I think it had ever been used. We're too darn busy to sit on our front porch, but our bodies are meant to rest, to have cycles that include periods of doing nada, nothing. The earth and the cycles of nature teach us to rest. At solstice, we celebrate the longest night of the year, the deepest darkness in the cycle of the earth's rest. And now, on Tuesday, we just had the spring equinox, and the earth is awakening from her rest and gearing up for new life and growth. As living beings, our lives are lived in cycles. We come into this world with energy and curiosity, and if we're blessed enough to live a long life, many of us will enter a season of slowness and enforced rest. I actually thought about using one of Rocky's poems that's about the enforced slowness, so she's in our library over here if you're interested. We're part of these cycles, whether we like it or not. We need to sleep, to survive, to have food and water, but we've learned that we can get away with pushing our physical needs right to the very minimum. We can go, and spend only the minimal time tending to our bodies and relaxing our minds. But at what cost? Is our exceptional productivity worth the price of our peace and joy? What would happen if we made more time for imagination, for letting our minds wander and simply being? Rest is what allows us to make space for each other and for our own muses. Now, some of us, like our caregivers, have non-negotiable, time-consuming responsibilities. And some of us in our lives did not ask for our responsibilities to care for an aging or sick family member, to work multiple jobs, to make ends meet, or to finish a degree. But even during those times of heightened stress and burden, let us work towards a world where rest is a cultural norm, where spaciousness, even in the midst of busyness, can liberate us. Let us give ourselves permission to ask other people for help, to recalibrate our attitudes, to remember that we have inherent worth and dignity. We don't have to exhaust ourselves in order to earn our right to be here. I don't want to be like that anymore. It takes some discipline and some mindfulness to keep 10 minutes sacred for spiritual practice in the morning, to learn to say no gracefully, except to requests to volunteer with faith development. Everything else say no to. No, it's fine, and we have created a culture here where we ask because we accept no. It takes a little mindfulness and discipline not to schedule our meetings back to back. And perhaps we follow the wisdom shared in our reading today from Judaism, and we keep a Sabbath. Let us put down our phones and distractions and listen deeply to each other. Make some time to eat mindfully, to sit in our patio chairs, and to feel the breath in our lungs. You have a right to exist, and you do not have to prove your worth through productivity. You are enough, and you deserve to rest. I'll leave you today with the words of Black womanist poet Nikki Giovanni. She says, "Sometimes the window is open, and a breeze comes through singing a sweet song. It is nap time. Grandmother sits on the front porch. Grandpa cuts the grass. It is a song. You nap, I nap. The angels hug us. A book settles beside us. Rest is resistance. It is a war, and we will win. Blessed be."